Russia wants to remove me from power before end of year, Zelenskyy. Ukrainska Pravda. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that Russia wants to remove him from the post of president of Ukraine by the end of 2023, for which it has come up with a destabilization plan codenamed Maiden 3. Source: Volodymyr Zelenskyy in an interview with UK tabloid The Sun. Quote, "The last information is that there is a plan that they want really much, and the name of the operati on is Maiden 3. Below are your comments. First, in a democracy, which left-wing extremists tell us Ukraine is, the president is not in power. He is not in control. He is a representative of the people, and it's the people that are in power and control. Somewhere along the line that fact got lost. Second, I don't care if Zelenskyy is booted. All the bravado and bragging about chasing Russia out of the Black Sea has suddenly evaporated. The comedian now claims Russia has the power to remove him from office even as Kiev is winning. Maybe he should use all the new toys he has been boasting about receiving from the West to protect himself. Ukraine wants Zelenskyy removed from power. He has been a terrible leader as Ukraine, a country of 35 meters. Ilion got invaded by 50,000 Russian soldiers in old equipment, and they let them roll in. Zelenskyy did nothing to harden Ukraine infrastructure even with months to prepare. Remember when Milley said that Kiev would fall 72 hours after Russia invaded? He said that almost 2 years ago. That is just one of many indicators of how little anyone knows about what's really going on. And no one cares, as just about everyone involved is profiting from the war. Very good, and I applaud that, to stop the slaughter on both sides. You've been acting like a big dog when you are not. You could have remained neutral and spare the lives of your people and leveled infrastructure, but you chose to let Daddy Joe and Papa Boris to have your back, and next thing you knew. Next news. EU prepares plan to give Ukraine lasting security commitments. Bloomberg. The European Union has presented member states with a framework to give Ukraine lasting security commitments, including a mechanism for longer-term military support, the training of Ukrainian troops, and help to boost the country's defense industry. Most read from Bloomberg. Sam Altman, OpenAI board, open talks to negotiate his possible return. Binance pleads guilty, loses CZ, pays fines to end legal woe. Sam Altman returns as OpenAI CEO in chaotic win for Microsoft. Nvidia fails to satisfy. Below are your comments. By EU do you mean NATO, and by NATO do you mean the USA? Consider how much the USA has given. The EU will not even come close to that without the help of the USA. Of course, our representatives that don't represent us will give anything to foreign wars, but nothing to help our own suffering people here. The EU is supposed to be an economic union. Military matters are not in the job description. Just another step towards the destruction of the EU. If security equals 5 million dead Ukrainians because of war and conflict with Russia for many genera, Tions to come, so what is security for in the first place when they can talk it out and offer a solution instead of warmongering? It's interesting that the European Union is making plans for long-term assistance to Ukrainian clowns. Europe are heading towards collapse. In a few years you will not be in Europe. In place of Europe there will be separate states with their own borders. Some may start a war among themselves. Next news. North Korea claims satellite win after 2 failures this year. Bloomberg. North Korea claimed it successfully put a spy satellite into orbit after 2 attempts earlier. TS's year ended in failure, as leader Kim Jong-un pledged to place more in the sky to keep an eye on U.S. forces in the region. Most read from Bloomberg. Sam Altman, OpenAI board open talks to negotiate his possible return. Binance pleads guilty, loses CZ, pays fines to end legal woe. Sam Altman returns as OpenAI CEO in chaotic win for Microsoft. Nvidia fails to satisfy lofty investor expectations. Below are your comments. Time to send the X-37B over to it to have a look, or more. And according to many sources, it's not on any intentional course. Basically spinning in a wobbly state and under no control whatsoever. So, a new piece of space trash that will burn up when it slips out of orbit, and nothing spectacular at all. Cheers, Kim. This is the reasons frequent military exercises with US, SK and Japan in Korean Peninsula increase tensions and not helping peace in the regions. Every time military exercises completed, NK launches missiles, now military, spy satellite. Obviously, the rocket came from Russia. It's hilarious to me that this is one of the most strictly sanctioned and shut-off countries the war LD has ever known, yet they still have nukes and now they have a military spy satellite. The world has done absolutely nothing to keep this trash heap of a country under control. It's pathetic. Next news. South African leader accuses Israel of war crimes. Putin and Xi strike more cautious note at meeting. Associated Press. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa accused Israel of war crimes and acts tantamount to genocide in Gaza during a virtual meeting Tuesday of leaders of developing countries, including Russia's Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping. Ramaphosa also condemned Hamas for its attack on Israeli civilians that sparked the war in Gaza and said both sides were guilty of violating international law. Below are your comments. While I think Israel's approach and strategy should be a lot more targeted and tactical to avoid civilian casualties, South Africa should be critical of their buddy Putin, who has been supporting Hamas and facilitating the initial attack. The hypocrisy is suffocating. I wonder what he thinks about the situation in Congo, which is closer to him. I haven't heard him commenting or helping find a solution to the problems that of all those innocent people are going through. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa needs to go back into his hole. If Israel agrees to this ceasefire, they have lost their mind. Hamas needs to release all hostages before any negotiations or the war goes on. Has anyone seen the alive 240 hostages? The last ones were dead? I hope that Mr. Ramaphosa told Mr. Putin about the genocide he has been committing in Ukraine for the last 21 months unless he was too afraid to say anything to Putin. Next news. Russia tries to calm hysteria over Ukraine's operations on left bank of Dnipro River, ISW. Ukraine's Ka Pravda. The Russian Ministry of Defense and Russian officials are trying to calm the Russian hysteria over Ukrainian operations on the left, eastern bank of Kherson Oblast. Source: Institute for the Study of War. ISW. Details. Military analysts said that Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu spoke at the board of the Russian Defense Ministry on 21 November and stated that Russian troops had interfered with all attempts by Ukraine to conduct successful landing operations on the Kherson front. Below are your comments. Russia is daily expending a lot of financial resources just keeping a fighting force in the field in a foreign country. Besides losing the financial resources, Russia is losing precious human capital. Russia anticipated crossing the Dnipro would be the biggest challenge. The Ukonazis have been fortifying the area for quite some time. Progress will be made this winter, but it will be slow. After, it is onward to Kiev. Russia fire. They ain't really sweating it. They have the Ukis in a cauldron in Avdiivka. The ones hysterical are the Ukis and their U.S. West supporters. Hysteria. Funny, if Western people could use internet, they will find no hysteria on Russian segment of it. But all this wannabe stories shows very well how desperate Ukrainists are now. Good. Next news. Explainer why North Korea's satellite launches draw condemnation. Reuters. North Korea appears to be preparing for its third attempt this year at launching a reconnaissance satellite, a move that may prove as controversial as the nuclear-armed country's weapons tests. Earlier attempts on May 31, North Korea's first such launch since 2016 in August 24 ended in fiery failures when its new CHOLLIMA-1 rockets crashed into the sea. North Korea has notified Japan it plans to launch a satellite between Wednesday and Dec. 1, prompting criticism from Japan and South Korea. Below are your comments. So the gringos are frothing at the corners of their mouth because Kim Jong-un has shrugged off Anglo-American sanctions against the DPRK and gone ahead with the development of a spy satellite that he feels he needs to better protect his beleaguered country. Who stands with the USA and South Korea? The launch is condemned by North Korea's adversaries, which I don't find too surprising. Love the pic. BlackBerry Blonde, 215-2. So we have a right to launch satellites and they don't. That's nonsense. Nobody cares about this launch, they're bleep it all out of proportion to use as distraction from the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Next news. UN warns food aid for 1.4 million refugees in Chad could end over limited funding. Associated Press. Food assistance to 1.4 million refugees in Chad who fled the conflict in parts of the Sahel could end because of limited funding, the United Nations Food Agency warned Tuesday. Most of the refugees escaped the war in Sudan and crossed into Chad in the last 6 months in number. Not seen in the last 20 years, the UN's World Food Programme said in a statement. This forgotten crisis has metastasized as the world's eyes are on other emergencies. We cannot let the world stand and allow our life Below are your comments. The UN has the audacity to cast aspersions at Israel about food and fuel in Gaza when it cannot provide food to 2/3 as many people fleeing Sudan where an actual genocide is occurring. Perhaps the UN should get its house in order before it attacks anyone else about taking care of refugees. Find someone else to pick their pockets. There's no more money in the till here, can't even handle our own homeless. If we feed the 1.3 million in 2 years, there will be 2.6 million or more. Defund the UN. The largest and fastest growing refugee populations in Africa. Next news. NATO head says violence in Kosovo unacceptable while calling for constructive dialogue with Serbia. Associated Press. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said Tuesday that the recent violent outbreaks in Kosovo were unacceptable and perpetrators must be brought to justice. I count on all sides to reduce tensions and to refrain from escalatory actions, he said during a visit to Serbia's capital Belgrade, after his stops in Bosnia and Kosovo, on the second day of his trip in the Western Balkans. Stoltenberg's trip reflects Western concerns over the stability of the volatile Balkan region that went through. Below are your comments. Just like the West colonists created the Israeli-Palestinian issue, the West, NATO, the Cold War product, created the Kosovo issue. O tempora o mores. Who could imagine that Serbs in the cradle of their nation are being ruled by cruel fist of Albanians as a proxy of some illegal and unjustified organization of several countries calling themselves NATO? This would be funny if it wasn't tragic. Most Serbian people never forgot that NATO bombed Serbia that led to the breakaway province Kosovo. Kosovo is Serbian forever. Next news. ABC News. U.S. shell deliveries to Ukraine have dropped over 30% since Hamas' October 7 attack. Kyiv Independent. The U.S.'s deliveries of NATO standard 155 mm shells to Ukraine have decreased by more than 30% since the beginning of the Israel-Hamas conflict on October 7, an unnamed Ukrainian official told ABC News on November 21. Below are your comments. I'd have to ask, why does Israel need artillery shells and bombs now with the war just over a month old? Did Israel not have a stockpile of shells and bombs of their own before the conflict started? How could they have run low already? With that, Ukraine is still reporting a lot of good news and progress every day. It means the delivery is enough. That still equals nearly 70% artillery shells delivered. Make every shot count. We really should be ramping up production. Create some jobs for Americans. Same thing happened during Vietnam War. Israel wanted all American arms industry to work for Israel and support them during Arab-Israel War. They were not accepting sharing weapons with Vietnam. Eisenhower wanted to bring Israeli leader and Vietnam leader together and discuss how he can balance the next news. Hungary's opposition to Ukraine's EU accession not insurmountable. Zelenskyy, the new voice of Ukraine. Budapest's current opposition to beginning negotiations on admitting Ukraine into the EU can be overcome diplomatically, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said during a joint press conference with Moldovan President Maya Sandu on November 21. Below are your comments. How can Zelenskyy and Ukraine be so naive? If Ukraine indeed wins this war, there will be no reason for EU to have another buffer state against Russia. All the more why would existing former Eastern Bloc EU states agree to Ukraine's admission when it only means sharing of subsidy with Ukraine for. Hopefully the Hungarians will leave the European Union and go back to their masters in Russia, who they seem to hold in such high esteem. They do not seem to want the same democratic and free market values as most people in the West. So what good are they as a part of the European Union? Maybe not, but the law says you cannot join during time of war. That sure makes it insurmountable. God bless Orban and Hungary. You think Putin will allow Hungary to consent? Next news. Ukraine should remain in the focus of world attention, Estonian Defense Minister. Ukrainska Pravda. Estonian Defense Minister Hanno Pevkur said that Ukraine should remain in the center of world attention, and that Russian war crimes should not be forgotten. Source: Hanno Pevkur during a visit to Canada, European Pravda, Air details. We are united in our views on helping Ukraine. Various crises cannot overshadow Russia's barbaric war crimes and take away the focus and efforts to support Ukraine, Pevkur said. Below are your comments. This fiasco has cost Ukraine's proxy backers over $300 billion so far, based on Kiel Institute data. Perhaps Estonia can pick up the entire tab from now on. I'm confused. The narrative was Russia is suffering significant losses of personnel and equipment. So please explain the math of how they'll be a bigger threat to the entirety of NATO if they succeed in Ukraine? If they're losing hundreds of thousands of troops and billions in equipment, how do? Yes, we Americans agree only if the EU pays the money. No, they should not. At least not here. They are part of another continent. Hello? Next news. Ukraine holds new positions on left bank of Kherson Oblast and strike Russians, General Staff. Ukrainska Pravda. Ukraine's defense forces are holding new positions on the left, eastern bank of the Dnipro River in Kherson Oblast, repelling Russian attacks on a number of fronts in the east and south of the country. Below are your comments. The bottom line remains. Russia only has about 1/3 of the troops necessary to hold their 600-mile-long MLR. They have tried to compensate by not having reserves or troop rotations, but that is far too little. That's why they invested so heavily in minefields and defensive positions. If Ukraine falls to Putin, he won't stop there. Also, China will be more likely to invade Taiwan. Supporting Ukraine is very much in our best interests. I assume Ukraine is attacking the weakest part of the Russian defenses, which is probably the left bank of the Dnipro River. Russia probably thinks the river is a good obstacle and Ukraine is overcoming that obstacle. I am so impressed at the courage and devotion of the Ukrainians who are fighting so hard for the survival of their country. Next news. U.S. ambassador to UN likens Putin to Stalin. Kyiv Independent. During a meeting of the UN Security Council, the ambassador said that Putin, like Stalin, used food as a weapon of war, and that the Holodomor has become a cautionary tale about what happens when we let cruelty and tyranny go unchecked. Below are your comments. Tragically, Putin feels complimented to be compared with Stalin. Stalin systematically bleeped and intentionally starved to death millions of Ukrainians, repopulating those areas with ethnic Russians. Today, in Russian-occupied Ukraine, anyone not declaring glory to Putin's Russia is tortured. The similarities are there. He did recently have exposed documents of his early-on strategy to blow up Ukraine grain plants and try to starve the population in Ukraine. They share the soul of evil. They have no concern for bleep of innocent civilians. Stalin bleep in a mass scale and even in HL. Here is the most recent one. Benjamin Netanyahu. He uses food, water, air, medicine for war. Putin is 100 times better than him. The ambassador must have not seen news lately. Please wait a moment. Whom he compares Netanyahu to? Next news. China's Xi urges release of civilians in Israel-Hamas war. Bloomberg. Chinese President Xi Jinping called for the release of all civilians detained during the Israel-Hamas war and reiterated his call for an immediate ceasefire at a summit organized by BRICS nations. Most read from Bloomberg. Sam Altman, OpenAI board open talks to negotiate his possible return. Binance pleads guilty, loses CZ, pays fines to end legal woe. Sam Altman returns as OpenAI CEO in chaotic win For Microsoft, Nvidia fails to satisfy lofty investor expectations for AI boom. Israel and below are your comments. Why not extending this thought to Ukraine? Share the idea of virtue, peace and safety worldwide, not just based on political alliances. She knew very well about Hamas. Did he ever ask Hamas not to attack Israel before October 7, 2023? How much did China help Hamas build those tunnels and many other items? I'm so glad he is on this. China has always been such a leader in human rights. She doesn't have a say. He thinks he understands the world politics. He only understands his. Will China also do the same with their captives and slaves? Next news. Manipulated photo of Biden greeting Xi Jinping spreads on XAFP. Social media users claim a picture shows U.S. President Joe Biden facing the wrong direction while greeting Chinese President Xi Jinping in November 2023 near San Francisco. But the image is altered. Photos and videos from AFP and other news organizations show the two shaking hands, and at no point is Biden misdirected. Below are your comments. It is so refreshing to have a president whose enemies, in their search to find dirt on him, have to make stuff up or exaggerate his normal human mistakes of tripping upstairs. Who hasn't done that? Refreshing indeed. However, with that being said, I do wish for a younger option going on. Well, of course. X is Trumplican Central. AFP is propaganda and gross misinformation media. Sickening the lies the traitors will go to in order to destroy the country. Must be related to the other propaganda site Media Matters, if you like lies. Biden has harmed America more than any nuclear weapon could. To respect old people is a virtue in China. Next news. Russia likely stockpiling missiles for new attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, UK Intellige. NCE. The new voice of Ukraine. Russia has likely stockpiled missiles for a repeat of last year's attempt by Moscow to destroy Ukraine's critical infrastructure, reads the latest UK Defence Intelligence report published on November 21. Below are your comments. When is enough enough? My God, why can't people stop this madman? If this were their own country's demise, it would be much different. Ukraine has paid such a huge price for being a small country. Get this slow slaughter over with and cause Russia to go to a place they belong. Too bad Biden is too old and scared to send tomahawks to Ukraine. He only wants Ukraine to be strong enough to fight the Russians to a stalemate on the front lines. Not strong enough to win. We have to spend time to find out where they are going to store all those missiles, then we'll have fireworks on December 31st. God loves a trier smiley face. Russia likely stockpiling missiles for new attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Next news. Brazil's Lula seeks to patch up tattered relations with Argentina's Milei. Bloomberg. Brazil leader Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva expressed willingness to overcome political differences with Argentine President-elect Javier Milei, as he seeks to preserve ties between the neighboring nations despite tensions between them. Most read from Bloomberg. Sam Altman, OpenAI board open talks to negotiate his possible return. Binance pleads guilty, loses CZ, pays fines to end legal woe. Sam Altman returns as OpenAI CEO in chaotic win for Microsoft. Nvidia fails to satisfy lofty investor. Below are your comments. Brazil is in bad shape. Too many favelas. Poor people living on government handouts. They have no way to improve this. They dug their hole deep. All they can do is be poor forever now and beg China for money. Make Argentina great again. Lulu is a typical liberal, far-left nut. Brazil can do better than that. The new kid better be careful talking about China being assassin. Remember Chile's Allende? Guess which nice guy assassinated him? Next news. Zelenskyy on whether Ukraine could bleep Putin. We have the right to defend our land. Ukrainska Pravda. Volodymyr Zelenskyy has said that just as Russia has not abandoned its intentions to get rid of him by any means possible, so Ukraine also has the right to bleep Vladimir Putin because it is about protecting the country. Below are your comments. Americans have the right to Epstein's client list. Do it, it would end your war. If anything happens to Putin, just a tenth of the Russian army would march and overtake Ukraine. Till now Ukraine has been fighting against soldiers from breakaway regions and some conscripts. Even with that, Ukraine lost over 500,000. I hope he does it and it spurs an endless cycle of revenge bleep of high-ranking politicians instead of innocent citizens like we have now. Bleep Putin won't save Ukraine from annihilation. Zelenskyy will either flee or be bleeped by the end of this war. The Russian people are behind this war and want an end to the Kiev regime and their Western-backed Z militia. Next news. U.S. condemns launch of North Korea spy satellite. The Hill. The U.S. condemned North Korea's Tuesday launch of a spy satellite, which Pyongyang claims was successful after previous attempts earlier this year failed. North Korea successfully launched the reconnaissance satellite, called the MALLIGYONG-1, atop a Chul Lima 1 rocket in the country's main launch center Tuesday night, according to state-run news agency Korean Central News Agency, KCNA. Below are your comments. So we can do it but they can't? Americans teach children not to bully. But I am not sure how if we bully other nations. That's all we do, condemn countries for violations. We had a chance in the early 90s and early 2000s to take out his family and we waited. Wasn't it Bush Jr. who said it would be decades before NK mastered the technology to build an ICBM? And what a couple years later after Kim Jong-un takes over the none of our business. Americans are tired of this game and war-mongering. Don't they have the right? Next news. Canada to run deeper deficits as Trudeau tackles housing. Bloomberg. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government revealed billions in new spending on housing programs and industrial subsidies, increasing Canada's budget deficit amid the dual pressures of higher borrowing costs and a slowing economy. Most read from Bloomberg. Sam Altman, OpenAI board open talks to negotiate his possible return. Binance pleads guilty, loses CZ, pays fines to end legal woe. Sam Altman returns as OpenAI CEO in chaotic win for Microsoft. Nvidia fails to satisfy lofty investor E. Below are your comments. Trudeau is buying votes. He's a globalist, so nothing new here. Can't post hope Canadian really feel Trudeau government blocks everything. Interesting that in the Canadian Constitution it declares that the national government is responsible for providing housing for all of its citizens. Log cabins are cheaper. Trudeau is still spending Canada into massive debt, while the Zionist bankers thank him. Next news. White House. Wagner prepares to provide air defense to Hezbollah or Iran. Kyiv Independent. The declassified White House intelligence confirms that the Russian Wagner Group has been preparing to provide air defense capabilities to either Iran or Hezbollah, National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby told reporters on November 21. Below are your comments. The United States Air Force is warning its members to not participate in a pro-Trump rally if they want to continue their service. Military leadership at the Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota sent out a warning message that anyone who attends the Dakota Patriot Rally hosted by Turning Point. So liberals have now allied themselves with Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and Russia. Biden and the Democrats don't care what happens to our military in foreign countries. Time to vote all Democrats out of office! Exclamation mark. All the more reason to support Ukraine. Russia is an enemy without a conscience. Just take them out before they get set up. Next news. Ukrainians who fled their country for Israel find themselves yet again living with war. Associated Press. Tatiana Prima thought she'd left the bombs behind when she fled Ukraine more than a year and a half ago, after Russia decimated her city, Mariupol. The calm she was slowly regaining shattered again on October 7, when Hamas militants invaded. Since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, more than 45,000 Ukrainians have sought refuge in ISR. AEL, according to the Central Bureau of Statistics and Aid Groups. Below are your comments. So, the Ukrainians that moved to Israel last year have more rights in Palestine than the Palestinians that have been there for centuries. Okay, now I understand. And they still haven't figured out they are the problem. Well, trouble does seem to follow certain groups of people, doesn't it? If you want freedom, fight for it. Don't be chasing it somewhere else where someone else fought and died for it. Next news. Obama, Clooney and Gates, we can end child marriage in a generation. BBC. Michelle Obama, Amal Clooney and Melinda French Gates tell the BBC about the need to end child marriage. Below are your comments. How about stamping out human trafficking? It is a major problem in the U.S. I also think the big problems is with forced marriage, at any age, which is another form of slavery. I don't see much difference in an 18-year being forced to marry a 50-year compared to a 16-year being forced to marry a 50-year beau. How many of those three were on the island? I guess I am missing something. Young women are too young to give consent for marriage but are able to give consent to have transgender surgeries and drug therapy which has lifetime consequences. Not following the thought process. Stop the billionaires who were Epstein's friends from rewriting the narrative. What happened to the liberal we need to respect other people and their culture? Next news. Germany announces new military aid package with Iris-T air defense systems. Ukrainska Pravda. Germany has promised Ukraine another €1.3 billion military aid package, which includes, among other things, 4 additional Iris-T SLM air defense systems, as well as 20,000 155mm artillery rounds and anti-tank weapons. Below are your comments. German clowns and their Bundeswehr can't do anything but smile. A very tiny German fascist. Yes, there was a time when Germany had the best army in the world in 1930 to 1945, which was almost impossible to defeat, but time has passed and now Germany is engaged in clowning with Ukraine. The bloody show. Germans will be getting kickbacks from Ukraine with US taxpayer dollars to build Germany into the new NATO leader of Europe. Germany on the rise again. Huns love their past ally. Bandera of the Waffen SS-14 division would be proud. Next news. The importance of rebuilding the arsenal of democracy. The Dispatch. The U.S. can aid Ukraine and Israel at the same time, for now. But the long-term outlook is less certain. Below are your comments. As to the title, it never really got depleted. Closest to this was in the early years after the Cold War's end. Events from 99-01. The Kosovo op shortfall in Allied preparations capabilities, our own at 9/11, were the wake-up call. Overall, the US and our allies' capabilities have supplied th. 1.031 million added to the national debt per minute now. That time has gone in the decadence and decline stage of this country like Rome before it. The main secret of rebuilding the arsenal of democracy is founded in honestly regarding the whole people on the entire earth as the worthy members of the same one human family, created by the same Almighty Creator. Next news. Iran-backed militia hits U.S. forces at Iraq airbase, injuring 8, prompting retaliation. Fox News. An attack by an Iran-backed militia on U.S. forces stationed at Ain al-Assad airbase in Iraq early Tuesday prompted retaliation from an AC-130A IR craft. Below are your comments. Great job, Democrats. Bumbling puppet Joe won't do anything so as not to expose him and probably Obama for how much they got for giving Iran all that money. We have to vote Biden out and make sure Obama stays in check. That's where Brandon should have closed the base, not in Bananistan. If you can put aside your political bias, you would recognize the Iranians hate the U.S. whether ADO RR is in the White House, and this was going to happen regardless of what president is there now. The U.S. does and always has done what is in our best interest, and it rarely jives with theirs. It's on now! Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. ... Next news. Iran prepares to transfer ballistic missiles to Russia, report. The New Voice of Ukraine. U.S. officials believe that Iran is preparing to provide Russia with short-range ballistic missiles to us. Against Ukraine, The Wall Street Journal reported on November 21. Below are your comments. The West knows very well what and who the problem is. They keep kicking the can down the road and keep sitting on their hands and do nothing. Destroy all three, Russia, Iran, and NK at the same time when the time comes. In the meantime, NATO could give Ukraine long-range missiles in response. Germany, you can help out. Russia and Iran, the axis of evil. Let Russia take Ukraine and they will not stop there. Not that I would care much if Iran was erased from the map, but the reality is if US and NATO can supply one side, then Iran and North Korea can supply the other. Next news. General Staff. Over 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers trained in partner countries. Kyiv Independent. Over 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers have received training in facilities of more than 30 partner countries in less than 2 years, Interfax Ukraine reported on November 21, citing Major General Alexander Kirilenko, the Deputy Chief of the General Staff of Ukraine's Armed Forces. Below are your comments. Most likely, they are casualties of war already. Then how come the counter-offensive failed? Let's see. With Western-trained troops, with Western weapons, missiles, with Western intelligence and commands, and still could not do anything against a demoralized, untrained army with obsolete equipment. Interesting facts. Why can't Ukraine train their own? And then they complain that the training was not relevant to the battlefield. They will surrender quickly. Next news. UK intelligence says Russia has amassed sizable cruise missile stockpile ahead of winter. Ukrainsk. A Pravda. The UK Defence Ministry has noted that Russia has amassed substantial stockpiles of cruise missiles ahead of winter and is simultaneously shaping the battlefield for a potential winter campaign against Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Below are your comments. Is this the same British intelligence that said Russia was going to be completely out of missiles by the end of last winter and completely out of artillery ammunition by last summer? Asking for a friend. Well, duh, what you expect, it's a war. Good for them. Well, there's absolutely no way we're going to provide that many Patriot missiles to intercept them. So long, Ukraine. Sounds like there would be a major offense by Russia in the next few months. Next news. U.S. reduces artillery shells supply to Ukraine by more than 30%. Ukrainska Pravda. The U.S. has cut supplies of vital NATO standard ammunition to Ukraine by more than 30% since the start of Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza last month, ABC News reported, citing an unnamed Ukrainian official. Below are your comments. If Russia wins in Ukraine, it will signal the end of a rules-based international system. China will most definitely attack Taiwan. After Ukraine, Russia will retool and rebuild their army of orcs and attack the Baltic states, Moldova, Georgia, Kazakhstan, and Eastern Europe. This will be terribly bad. The U.S. has cut supplies of vital NATO standard ammunition to Ukraine by more than 30% since the start of Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza last month. Ukraine, or any other country, or Israel? Israel every time. Next news. ICE arrests Brazilian illegal immigrant child rapist in Martha's Vineyard. Fox News. Federal authorities this week announced that an illegal immigrant child rapist from Brazil was arrested last week in Martha's Vineyard and will face deportation proceedings. Below are your comments. So who exactly was sponsoring this person on Martha's Vineyard? That person or persons should be charged with harboring a fugitive and face the consequences to the full extent of the law. Illegals just don't go to the vineyard to hang out or take action. Biden and the Democrats are throwing a big party for him and wanting his relatives to come too. Martha's Vineyard is a sanctuary city. They love cultural enrichment. This is cultural enrichment. This is what they asked for. And this is what they demand that the rest of us accept. Next news. SBU detains priest of Kremlin-linked church over spreading pro-Russian propaganda. Kyiv Independent. A priest of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate has been detained for allegedly spreading pro-Russian propaganda during sermons, Ukraine's security service, SBU, reported on November 21. Below are your comments. What did Putin promise this man? Maybe more money, money bag, money mouth, face flying money thinking face. Russia lately is making an enormous propaganda attack everywhere it can to try persuade the world at Ukraine is the instigator and aggressor who started this war with Russia, all lies and fabricat. Ions as usual. You see people why we should send more and more money to Ukraine. They're really a democracy, and we must support democracies like Ukraine. Zelenskyy oppressing Christian churches, how democratic. Next news. Ukraine unveils powerful drone that can fly behind enemy lines, evade jamming. Kyiv Independent. The unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, dubbed Backfire, will help Ukraine hit Russian artillery, logistics hubs, enemy storage points, and command posts, Digital Transformation Minister Mikhailo Fedorov said. Below are your comments. Instant success after we learned that the Ghost of Kiev will be operating the Contro is. They really named it Backfire? Why not just name it Financial Failure, or Wasting U.S. taxpayer dollars by the tens of billions? Ukraine doesn't really do much on its own. I'm sure it was mainly funded and developed by the US. If the Russians cowardly attack civilian infrastructure again this winter, I would like to see that used on Russian cities. Only fair. Next news. Missing blob of water predicted to be in the Atlantic finally found. Live Science. The newly discovered water mass, called the Atlantic Equatorial Water, stretches from Brazil to West Africa. Below are your comments. Okay, explain this to me like I'm a 2-year-old. I would love to understand what this article is all about. Scientists have discovered water in the ocean. In a further study, it was found to be wet. Here's another prediction the experts told us and can't find now. Wednesday, March 15, 2023. 5,000 miles long, 400 miles wide, and over 6 million tons, a massive bloom of sargassum say. Odd is drifting toward Florida. They couldn't find water in the water. I guess another government grant is heading their way? Next news. Israel recalls its ambassador from South Africa. BBC. It comes a day after South Africa called for an ICC arrest warrant against Israel's Prime Minister. Below are your comments. The world could be a better place for us all if we would accept the truth that all human beings dare equal justice regardless of race, nationality or religion. We live inside of myths thinking some are better than others, which holds all of us down. Humanity is one. Bleep each other is not the South Africans know apartheid. According to Tutu and other SA leaders, Israel apartheid is 10 times worse than SA's. South Africa apartheid is more economic, whereas Israel's apartheid goal is extermination. Next news. Heavy fighting ongoing near Bakhmut, Ground Forces Commander. Ukrainska Pravda. Colonel General Alexander Syrskyi, commander of the ground forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, has said that heavy fighting is ongoing near Bakhmut in Donetsk Oblast. Source: Syrskyi on Telegram. Quote, heavy fighting continues near Bakhmut. Below are your comments. And so it goes. Russia attacks with superior numbers and retreats with superior losses. Putin loves his carpets of Russian cargo 200-300. Mornin' Orcs. Is he a cocaine addict like his boss Zelenskyy? Ukraine is trashed with most of its young males bleep. Zelenskyy has ordered to draft women. Next news. Zelenskyy talks Israel, U.S. elections with Fox's Benjamin Hall, and Ukraine's place among global risks. Case. Fox News. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy addressed the U.S. continued support for Ukraine in light of the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. Below are your comments. Spend all that money. Our money on America's border, not Ukraine's. Zelenskyy says wartime production creates more jobs for us, while at the same time he's using our funds to create a Ukrainian military-industrial complex. Thinking face, thinking face, thinking face. The guy who don't want peace is Zelenskyy, not Putin. Impeach potato Joe Biden and end his illegal war in Ukraine. Next news. Seoul warns North Korea not to launch spy satellite. C4ISRNET. North Korea failed in its first 2 attempts to put a military spy satellite into orbit this year and hasn't followed through on vow to make a 3rd try. Below are your comments. Trump's pals working together, and some Americans actually want Trump in power, too. Too late, they launched it. Russian technology, all parts made by Western countries, beside the metal parts Russians haven't eated squash.lol. Whoops. I do not understand SK's Yoon Government. Please subscribe to my channel. And if you like it, please thumbs up.